Hi, and welcome back. So far we've taken a look at how to create geometry based on a grid or based on some numerical value for a distance. But let's say that we want to use the geometry itself that already exists in a file to create new geometry. How do we reference the objects and use them to our advantage? Well, that's what object snaps is all about, and that's what we're going to take a look at next. So we're going to go ahead and maximize our top viewport, and I'm going to create a few pieces of geometry. I'm going to start off with a rectangle and just kind of loosey at this point. Doesn't really matter too much about position, but I'm going to create a circle that slightly overlaps a rectangle, or a square in that case. And I'm going to just create a few more elements. I'm going to create a rectangle here as well, a straight line, and a new tool here called control point curves, which works a lot like a spline tool that you might find in something like Illustrator or some of those other programs. And we're also going to drop a couple of points just for good measure. So this is the point command here. I'm going to right click to do multiple points, and it's going to allow me to just drop a few points throughout the scene. Okay, so let's say now that I want to draw a polyline, and I want to, first of all, I want you to make sure that everything is turned off here. So all these boxes should be unchecked. If you can't see the boxes, there's a toggle here that makes them visible and invisible. Make sure that it's visible. So I'm ready to drop my first point for a polyline, and I want that first point to start at the intersection of these two elements. Well, no matter how far in I zoom, I'm never going to be exactly on that point. But if I use my object snaps, I can get there very, very easily. And you'll notice down here we have a box that says intersection object snap. If you just left click on that, now as I hover over the intersection of those two lines, you'll notice that I get a tooltip that says int, which stands for intersection. So if I were to start my line when I see that tooltip, so I'm just left clicking to start, I now have placed a line at the intersection of those two, and I'm now free to place my next line wherever I want. Now these tools, or these object snaps, are persistent, which means that they'll continue running during the same command. You'll also notice that this is persistent, which means that throughout a command I can continue using that same object snap. So I'm going to snap to this intersection, to this intersection down here, to this one here, etc., etc. Another useful and commonly used object snap is the end snap, which is located down here. So I'm going to go ahead and activate that. And when I do that and restart my polyline tool to start drawing again, you'll notice that as I hover over top of this line, I get close to the end, it'll show me the end snap tooltip, and that tells me that I'm at the end of that line. So if I were to start my line from there and draw out, that's exactly at the end of that line now. So the end snap will work for the ends of elements. So the end of this line here, the end of this line, the other end right here. It also works in the case of a rectangle, for instance. The corners are considered endpoints as well. So I can snap to any one of those corners. For a circle, circles only have one endpoint, and so how do you snap to the rest of this circle? Well, you can use a near snap. So I'm going to just left click to activate my near snap, and you'll notice now that as I get close to it, I'm now snapping to the edge of that circle. So anywhere that I click and click away from, that's going to create a line that's right on that line. So restart that command. That's a near snap right there. I'm going to click to the edge of this circle over here, for instance. That's another near snap. And near will work for virtually anything. So I can snap to anywhere along this line for instance. I could snap to anywhere along this curve, for instance. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is the near snap can get you into problems sometimes. So right now I have my end and my near snap both enabled, and I want to start my line at the end of this line right here. But you'll notice that the near also pops up sometimes until I actually get to the very end of that line. And if you're doing things quickly and sort of haphazardly, you may end up clicking on the near rather than the end. And you might not see it from a distance, but that'll certainly cause problems later on, and you can certainly see that we were quite off there. So you want to make sure that you only have the near enabled when you actually need it. Otherwise, I would keep that off. So I'm going to turn that off for now. And I'm going to just back up a few steps here. There's another snap that we can use for the center of objects. So I'm going to start the polyline command, and this time I'm going to choose center as my snap and deselect everything else. And so the center will find the center of an object, in this case of a symmetrical object like a circle. And you'll notice that to get to the center snap of the circle, I don't hover around the center of it, I actually go to the perimeter of it, and that center snap shows up. So if I were to left click now, I'm now drawing from the center of that, and I can snap to, let's say, the center of this circle over here. Center snap will also work for some other symmetrical objects. So a rectangle, for instance, also has a center, and if I wanted to use that there, I could go like that as well. And a few more object snaps that we're going to take a look at. One is the mid snap, and that's found down here. So midpoint object snap. When I turn that on, that will find the, let me just turn off the center snap for a second. That will find the midpoint of an element. So in this case here, that's the midpoint of that rectangle. That's another midpoint right there. That's another midpoint right there. And it'll work with straight lines as well. So let me just snap up to here for a second so we can see this more clearly. So that's the midpoint of that line. That's where I'm snapping right now. It won't work on, well, actually it does work on organic shapes as well. Look at that. So that's the midpoint in length between this part of this curve and I guess this part right here. So that's mid. And finally, one more snap that can be very helpful in some cases is the quad snap, which is found right here. I'm going to just turn that on, turn off the mid for a sec, and restart my polyline tool. And the quad snap will find the quads of curves, and the quads are sort of the minimum and maximum locations in the x and y direction of curves. So in the case of this circle, I'll always have 4 quads for something like this, and those are my 4 quads right there. It doesn't work on squares or lines, but it'll also work on organic curves. So again, this is the lowest y point on this whole curve, so I can snap to that quad right there. I can also snap to the very top over here, and I'll have another quad there, and I think that's the last one. So quads will help, particularly when you're dealing with something that's round. You can always turn that on and see if it works. You can temporarily disable your snaps if you need to by simply hitting disable. And now I can continue to place points without having to disable everything manually here. So that's a quick way to get out of that. So this concludes this tutorial, and I'll see you at the next one. Thanks. There is one more snap that I should mention, and that's the point snap. So if we go ahead and I'm going to just re-enable this for a second. The point snap is right here. So click on that to start it. And now you'll notice that as I get close to a point, I'll be able to snap to it. So I could use that point and that point as snaps, and then go to some other type of snap beyond that. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you at the next video.